In the next section, starting on page 244, we're talking about ambiguity. Ambiguity is just some confusion about how a word's being used. It could mean more than one thing. And when ambiguous situations arise, we have to look to different kinds of cues to tell us which of two possibilities was intended. So let's skip to figure 7.5. It's on page 247. This figure is showing different possible ways that we might be dealing with ambiguity. The first way is to hear the phonetic sounds that construct the word bank. Bank, right? Once bank is activated, there are two possible uses of that word. Those two possible words, they're stored at the second level of the hierarchy, moving up. They're the lexical units. That's what they're labeled, lexical units. The first meaning of the word bank is a financial institution. It's housed in various branches. The second meaning of the word bank is land by water's edge. Those two lexical units, you can see by the red arrow between them, are inhibiting each other. So once we realize which bank we're talking about, our brains are going to try and push down the other kind of bank so that we're not thinking of that kind, so that it's less confusing to us. In order for us to know what kind of bank we're talking about, we have to look to the context in which the bank is being described. The particular context here, up at the very top, is Samira just got her paycheck. Given that we're talking about a paycheck, we assume that we're talking about a financial institution kind of bank. It's housed in various branches. In panel A, the representation here is checking each one of these semantic features off a list in order to decide whether the lexical unit is consistent with the context. In other words, bank 2, the second meaning of bank, could not be inhibited until after we have risen from the very bottom of this hierarchy, bank, to the second level of the hierarchy when both words bank are activated, and then we activate the semantic features of those words individually and check them against the context to see if they're compatible. Once we've learned that the financial institution and the housed in various branches are compatible, but that the land by water's edge is not compatible, then we could work backwards back down to the lexical unit stage when bank 2 would inhibit, or when bank 1 would inhibit bank 2. That's an inefficient model. It's a strictly bottom-up model. In other words, we're working from the bottom to go up to the top with no information from context influencing the lower stages of the model until the lower stage of the model specifically requests information from the context, which is at the top. In the second panel, panel B, this is a bottom-up and a top-down model combined. Bottom-up and top-down models can be used simultaneously, and often in our brain we see that there's plenty of evidence suggesting that bottom-up and top-down models are simultaneously working in other areas of cognition, not just language use. But here we see that we would start with the bank. Those sounds would activate lexical units, but already only one of those lexical units would be activated stronger than the other. The reason for that darker orange on bank 1 is because context has already from the top already activated the semantic features that we should be on the lookout for. It's already pre-activated financial institution and housed in various branches. Because it's pre-activated those semantic features have pre-activated lexical units. So by the time we work through the sounds, bank, then bank 1 is already activated to a greater extent than bank 2, and bank 1 inhibits bank 2 in a much faster and much more efficient method than we saw in the strictly bottom-up model that's demonstrated in panel A. So panel A is a bottom-up model only. Panel B is a top-down model combined with a bottom-up model. Now, box 7.2 asks us, why do we tolerate ambiguity? Why don't languages, with all of their infinite possibility of kinds of words, why don't we require more differentiation between types of words? For instance, I mentioned earlier that the word domer might be used in a lexical decision task because it's a legal word that doesn't mean anything. It's not a word, it's a pseudo word, right? But if we wanted to, we could recruit the word domer to mean land by a water's edge. And in doing so, we would essentially negate some ambiguity in the word bank. Bank would no longer mean two different things. It would now mean a financial institution. And it would not mean land by a water's edge, because that would now be the word domer. Obviously, we have a lot of pseudo words that could exist out there, possible word combinations that can be constructed that haven't yet been attached to any kind of meaning. So this box asks, why do we have so many redundant words that have multiple meanings? It answers the question to say that the most commonly used sequences of letters are those that are easiest to say, that end up coming quickest to mind, that when constructed in any given within the legal boundaries of a language, the words that are repeated most often are usually very short sequences of letters that have very few phonemic sounds that are easy to produce. And the reason why we tolerate ambiguity, as the text says here, is because it's not costly. Ambiguity is easy for us to solve. We don't struggle with it even a little bit, because given contextual cues and this top-down processing that we do have working through our brain, we can easily negate any kind of ambiguity that we would have. We can clear up before we even get to the word bank that because Samira is getting her paycheck, that it's going to be one kind of bank and not the other kind of bank. So it's not even a little bit confusing for us most of the time. Now, there are some instances when ambiguity is problematic for us, but it doesn't happen as often as more complicated strings of words would throw us off if we were to try to incorporate more words into our vocabulary that mean more different things. Then we would have to have longer strings of letters. They would have to be more complicated sounds. Still legal, yes, but more complicated and longer strings. And that would mean that it would, and that would throw us off more than ambiguity does. So that's the reason why we tolerate ambiguity in our languages.